So today we're going to make I'm going to show you how to make a little penannular brooch. I've got enough cut of copper piping here. Use anything that's solid. It could be some pipe, it could be a mandrel of some description, but just make sure that it's strong, solid, and you can hammer against it, because we're going to be hammering the wire against it. You want some very soft, thicker wire. I think this is about 2.2mm wire. I've pre-softened it by heating it with a blowtorch. I need a length. I'm just using scrap bits of wire today. And then for the pin itself, I'm using, I think this is about 1.6mm to 1.8mm wire. It's been pre-twisted. Doesn't have to be twisted. These are just offcuts I've got in the studio. So to start with, I'm going to look at the end of my wire, and that's a very sharp point you can see on there. I'm going to just cut that flush with my snippers. Hopefully these are strong enough. Let's see. Might need the bigger snippers for this. The thicker the wire, the harder it is to cut. So just be careful that you don't ruin your best jewellery snippers. I'm going to get a slightly blunter edge on there, and I'm going to file that straight away to smooth the edges. Just a little bit, it just helps. So that's one end. So I'm going to take my round form. This can be any size you like. The bigger the round form, the thicker the wire you'll need. So this is about the right sort of thickness for this size of circle. Which, just looking at that, I'll get my ruler. Just looking, it looks like about 3.5 centimetres. 3 centimetres. Yeah, 3.5 centimetres. 35mm, and I think that's probably about an inch and a bit. So I'm just going to bend my wire around the form. If your wire doesn't bend easily, you need to soften it. If you're using copper wire, which is what we're using for this. I want to go around in nearly a complete circle, and then I know where to cut off. I'm just going to do a very simple penannular brooch. We'll do others following this video. Just chop the end off, the excess that we don't need. So we don't need that. We can make another brooch out of that in a minute. So I just now want to get them really shaped around that circular form. I can use my little hammer to just gently knock those edges in, just so we've got a nice round form. Now the gap can be small like this, but I would prefer it a bit bigger, because when we hammer this, it's going to make the circles, it's going to make the wire longer, and it'll close that gap even more. So the end I haven't filed, I'm just going to cut a little bit more off, not too much. That's about right. So that's the sort of ratio for the gap. I'm happy with that, so I'm just going to file that end off. Should be good enough for the moment. Just going to double check. Still nice and round. I'm just going to tap those ends in. So in the next part, we're going to flatten the two ends so they will hold the pin in place. I'm going to use my bigger hammer for this. I don't actually have a chasing hammer as such, so these are just from the hardware store. I would have liked this hammer, but it's ever so marked where it was ground, and so that leaves those same marks in the copper. This one's really old and it's full of little pits. One day I'll get myself a nice clear chasing hammer, but never mind for the moment. For the purpose of this tutorial, we will go with what we've got. I think for this size wire action, we can stick with a small hammer. So we just want to hit repeatedly the ends. My hammer keeps coming loose, so I have to keep knocking it and banging that nail in. Just want to widen those tips nice flat end on the circle. A little bit more on that side. And there you can see starting to form a nice shape at the end. I'm just going to keep referring to my form here just to make sure we're not going off the circle. If it is going off the circle, give it a tap in the appropriate spot to just keep the centre of that brooch nice and circular. Now all I'm going to do now is very gently tap around the edges, just gently. The more you hammer the softened wire, the harder and stronger the wire becomes, and it stops losing its flexibility. I'm just going to flatten that gently, as much as you wish to flatten it. Keep referring to the form, making sure we're not going off. You see there's areas now we're starting to come off because the wire's stretching with the hammering. Just want to keep checking that, keeping that close to the form, making sure it looks circular. And keep on working until you're happy with the thickness. Because obviously the more you hit it, the wider the wire becomes, the flatter the wire becomes. We're not far off, but I can see that's going out of shape. I'm just going to gently remind it that it needs to be circular and not going off at an angle. It's not too bad, I don't think. Now the next step is I'm going to file those ends a little bit. You see how that gap's got closer again. So I'm just going to round off the ends with the file. Take off any sharp edges and get the shape how you want it. Remember to work from both sides. Shouldn't need a lot of filing. And run your finger over it. If you feel any sharp scratchy points, then just try and burr them off. The same with this one as here, this one this side. This one looks nice and rounded. Just going to take that corner off there a little bit. There we go. Now it still doesn't look quite circular, so I'm going to just keep on adjusting that till it looks right. Now, at this point, because I've used a flame to soften the wire, it's been oxidized. So I'm just going to give it a quick rub with my very fine wire wool just to take off some of those marks. I can have a look and see what it's looking like. And then we have some options. We can make it, keep it flat, or we can hammer it deliberately to give it some texture. I want to look at these ends more than anything, just to see how textured they are, because I like the ends to be quite smooth. Not looking too bad. And of course, the side that's against the metal, my metal block here, will be smoother, and that will normally be the front of the brooch. So as you can, if you compare them, you'll see which is the best side for the front of the brooch. If you wanted to sort of just have a very simple brooch, very smooth, you would just keep on polishing now. And we'll get to the polishing stage obviously at the end of this video, but you don't need to do any more to it than that. I'm also now going to show you how you could texturise the brooch. We could texturise one side and leave the other side smooth. Depending on how you do your pin, you could have it as a double-sided brooch. That's pretty much the basic principle of making the brooch itself. We'll now texturise it. I'm going to do a very simple one with the ball head of this hammer. I might as well use the very textured side because it's already got marks on it. And I'm just going to ever so gently tap it all over. Copper is very soft, easily marked with any tool. And so I just tapped it all over, and you've now got a very textured surface which catches the light. And the more you polish that up, the shinier it becomes, the more it catches the light. I hope you can see that okay. I still think that one is going out a little, so I'm going to compare it back to the round form just to make sure it's all nice and circular. I'm going to tap that side just a fraction. There, it seems to be going out. That's not too bad. So that's our form, our main brooch form. And now we're going to make the pin that attaches to it. You want to choose some thickish wire because copper is quite flexible. Now I've twisted this, which I will show at the end of the video how. That straightens it, but also strengthens it a little bit because it's not very bendable. It has the same effect as hammering it. I really quite like that pattern anyway, so we're going to stick with that. And I just want to cut off enough to give me a pin length and enough to wrap round. That should be sufficient. So we're going to start by just filing one end. I will be doing quite a few videos on the Penannular brooch because there are a few methods you can use depending on what wire thickness you're using and what end result you wish to achieve. There's a multitude of ways of decorating your brooch. You can keep this. I'm just going to do a fairly simple one today. You can add wire wrapping, you can add beads, you can add different textures. So I should be doing some more videos in the very near future. So I've flattened that out, smoothed it off with a file just so there's nothing sharp against when I rub my thumb against it, nothing sharp. And I'm ready to hammer. I want to hammer, I will measure this with the ruler. It's about 2 centimetres. This isn't the best ruler in the world, but yeah, about 2 centimetres of it, which is about 3/4 of an inch. Hammer that flat, like we did the ends of the brooch. Just, you don't have to bash it, just keep on hammering, keep looking at it. If it goes out of line, you might need to turn it on its side and just remind it that it needs to stay straight. Sometimes it doesn't cooperate. You can turn it over and hammer from the other side. Doesn't have to be hammered super flat. I just find it's nice to have it flat for making the hinge that goes around. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give that a quick wipe with the wire wool, just to give that a bit of a smooth off. Now I have hit both sides, so I've textured both sides, so I'm just going to hit it one side only a few more times, in the hope that the other side is now smoother, which it is, because that's going to be the side that shows. So then all I'm going to do, you could use round nose pliers. I happen to have my bail pliers here, so you just want to choose the thickness. That's probably too thick, I might need my other ones. We'll go for the round nose pliers. find out where on your pliers the thickness of the brooch is. It's about halfway. You want it a little bit more than the thickness. So about halfway is where I want to be holding the wire. I'm going to grip it in flush so that you can't feel the end. And then just gently push that round as far as you can go and try and get the full circle. If you haven't gotten all the way around, pop your pliers back in and just push it a bit more. A bit more than that. It's got quite hard because of the hammering. I don't want to close it completely because I'm going to slide it onto the brooch. But just enough. And then that's the side we want it to be on, so we want to slide it on that way. Find a thin point in the end of the brooch and slide it round. And then we just want to join that circle, that loop, so it's closed. So the brooch can spin round, it's nice and flexible, and we want to then check that that pin can't come off the ends. If it can come off the ends, you've got two choices. Is make that circle very much a little bit smaller, or make your ends a bit bigger. But I think we're good to go. So now all I need to do, decide how long I want my pin. I normally just go a little bit outside of the circle. I cut that off. Now there's 2 points I tend to do. There's the arrow point, well I call it the arrow point, but it's very pointy, or the rounded one. So on this video I'm going to show you the rounded one. On a different video I'll show you another method. So all I'm going to use is my file, holding it against the wire at a 45-degree angle like that, and just keep turning like you're sharpening a pencil. So just keep on turning it until you create a dull point. It's just to guide it through the fabric that you're going to use. Now these brooches are suitable for woolens, for knitted items, for woven items. It can be quite tightly woven. They go through. They do go through, but it's not for super tight woven fabrics, okay? So don't try forcing it through anything that's too tightly woven. But you'll be surprised at what it can go through. So all I'm doing is just making a dull point. Nothing too sharp. This isn't intended to scratch you or snag your fabric. It's just to round the... Oh, look, it's fallen off. So we'll adjust that in a second. So we're just going to make that into a dull point, a rounded end. And when you're happy with that, we'll reattach it to the... Let's come off one of those. So one of those is... I'm going to open it back up, make it easier to put on. Pop it back on. There we go. And just do that up a little bit tighter than it was. Because the whole point of these pins is that the pin stays with the brooch, so you never lose the pin. So I'm just going to put that on nice and tightly. Test that again. And I think I maybe ought to just hammer the ends just a little bit more. So I'm going to turn the brooch over, hammer from the other side. Actually, it doesn't really matter which side I hammer from, but I will. I'll hammer from this side. It'll make those bits smoother, and just make those a little bit bigger. That shouldn't come off. That shouldn't come off. I'm just going to adjust that because by eye it just looks like that's gone out of alignment again. I'm just going to bend that in a fraction. That doesn't look too bad. And now I'll polish it up with the wire wool, and in a separate video I'm going to show you how to finish the polishing of all of these brooches that we're going to be making, continuing some wire wool and then using the rotary tool buffer head and some polishing compound just to give it a really good shine. But this just takes off some of the marks the tools have made. You can use it super fine sandpaper suitable for metal if you've got any. I do find this is like something like 00 extra fine wire wool, and it's pretty good at just removing the worst of the marks, and it brings up the shine. There we go. And then all I do now is just check that that's not sharp. If it is a little sharp, then just use your file and buff the edges. You can use your wire wool just to take off tiny burrs, because the last thing you want to do is, if you're wearing a nice bit of delicate fabric that you've put this through, you don't want to snag it. And there we have it, our little penannular brooch. And I'll just go and get a scarf or something. So I've got my scarf just to show you how to attach your brooch. So imagine this is your shawl or your kilt or your cardigan, and you're joining two pieces together. You pop the pin through and back out, and then you bring it to the front and just turn the brooch like that, and there you have it. It'll stay in place, hold your garment, your shawl, your cardigan, or just use it as a decorative brooch. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please give me a thumbs up if you did. And consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching.